Well, welcome everybody. I'm Johnny Timpson, and I'm delighted to be joined by Carle of BlackRock on today's Gain Count Me In podcast. Graham, welcome to Gain. We're thrilled to be working with you as our ambassador in Scotland and with the investment sector diversity project. And we're even more delighted to be working with BlackRock. So, a little bit about you. Can you tell us a little bit about your career journey so far? How you progressed within BlackRock as someone that's neurodivergent.
Certainly. So I've been at BlackRock for 23 years this year. I came in as an analyst and I'm now managing director. I work in the technology side of things, building our application called Aladdin. Um, I went through most of my career at BlackRock not being neurodivergent. I've been late diagnosed, both ADHD and autistic within the last 18 months. And since then, I've really become passionate about supporting neurodiversity and neurodivergence in the workplace. I've set up BlackRock's Neurodiversity Network, and hopefully we can talk a little bit more about that over the coming podcast.
Thanks for that. I'm just in your thoughts. What made BlackRock decide to work with Gain, and how does this partnership align with your values and passion for neurodiversity?
So BlackRock decided to join GAIN because we recognize the importance of fostering a diverse and inclusive workplace. Partnership with GAIN aligns really well with our commitment to creating an environment where everyone can thrive regardless of their neurodiversity. Additionally, GAIN has a community of neurodivergent talent. So it's also important from a talent acquisition perspective, getting us access to a wider pool of talent in the UK. BlackRock is also a member of the Diversity Project in the UK. I'm a member of their neurodiversity workstream. And from everything I've learned through working with you so far, GAIN and the Diversity Project really work very closely together. So joining GAIN gives us both sides of that same coin, if it were, as it were. So from that perspective, it's really good from a holistic point of view.
Yeah.
But personally, somebody diagnosed as ADHD and autistic, I'm passionate about advocating for neurodiversity. I've been doing that in the firm, and doing that from a wider perspective is something that I'm very passionate about.
Yeah, maybe dig a little bit deeper on that one, Graham. What does being a GAIN ambassador mean for you personally? How do you kind of envisage using this role to further advocate neurodiversity within the financial services and investment community in Scotland?
Well, it's a significant honor for me. This will be the first time I've been sort of out, as it were, in the industry and in Scotland. I might not sound Scottish, but I've lived for most of my life in Scotland. My family's from the Shetland Islands. I went to university here in Edinburgh. I did have a fairly long stint with BlackRock down in London, but I returned to Scotland in 2017. And from a technology point of view in my role, I really wanted to build up Scotland from a technology perspective. I left Scotland because I didn't see as many interesting jobs that took my fancy in Scotland. So over the years I've been here, I've been focusing on raising tech talent in Scotland in the wider area. And this is really just allowing me to now take what I've learned about myself over the last 18 months and what I've learned about neurodiversity, and really try and help other organizations and people in Scotland to create a more neurodivergent friendly workplace. I think through 40 something years of being neurodivergent and not realizing, I kind of span what I count as both sides of the fence. I spent most of my life not being neurodivergent and having, my understanding of what neurodivergence was, and suddenly kind of having, I won't say my life turned upside down, but suddenly having this kind of awareness and knowledge through my own diagnosis. I kind of hope I can help to raise awareness and understanding across our industry and in Scotland in general.
Yeah. And I that resonates with me, Graham. I mean, here's me, an autistic person with traits of ADHD, interviewing someone who's got ADHD and traits of autism. I mean, Let's maybe just look at ADHD for me in a bit more detail. I mean, ADHD awareness has become increasingly important, especially in the workplace. How has your own experience with ADHD and autism helped you shape your approach to uh, leadership and advocacy? I mean, not just in Scotland, but across the BlackRock group.
Well, as I kind of mentioned a minute ago, I kind of have come from a background in my life where I didn't know very much about neurodivergence or neurodiversity. I had my own uh, opinions and stereotypes of what I thought neurodivergence was, and so I do feel like I've been, I think, as many people that are diagnosed ADHD or autistic, done an awful lot of research. The diagnosis process itself kind of gives you a lot of information about what it is and what it isn't and what it can affect and what it doesn't. So I think that specifically around myself has given me that, a much deeper knowledge and a deeper understanding. A lot of my life I went through struggling with being able to do certain things, and this is fairly common, as I found out, with undiagnosed neurodivergence, and that causes a lot of internal anxiety and feelings of, not being good enough, which in my case pushed me even harder to get to where I am today. But it does come at a mental cost. So I feel like with all the background through living as an undiagnosed neurodivergent, and now as a diagnosed neurodivergent, it gives me a lot of kind of background and knowledge about the way that we could be approaching, tackling, creating a neuroinclusive workspace for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about your experience, I mean, what do you think the most significant challenge faced by individuals with ADHD is, particularly in the investment profession? And what's BlackRock itself doing to help people overcome those challenges?
Well, I think, like a lot of people, I thought ADHD just affected kids. It was actually only fairly recently that adult ADHD was added, to the diagnostic criteria and could be diagnosed. To be diagnosed ADHD, you have to go through a very rigorous process with medical professionals. Maybe a bit of psychoeducation, as this is ADHD Awareness Month. ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder. It affects both children and adults. It's characterized by persistent symptoms of inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity that interfere with daily functioning and development. Symptoms often begin in childhood and can continue into adulthood. It can impact social relationships. It can impact school or work performance and overall quality of life. The three main types of ADHD are recognized now. Inattentive type, that's characterized by symptoms of inattention, maybe problems focusing on tasks, missing details, easily distracted, having difficulty organizing thoughts and activities, and possibly with the outward appearance of daydreaming. As opposed to the hyperactivity or impulsive type, which is marked by symptoms of hyperactivity and impulsivity, not surprisingly. People with this type might fidget and can't stand still, have trouble sitting still. They might talk excessively, act without thinking, have difficulty waiting their turn and interrupting others. And then the third type is combined, which is both of those. I'm combined type, so I can't sit still. I often interrupt people in meetings. And so all of those things, if you think about it in any industry, like are a challenge to, fitting in and actually behaving as a neurotypical might find it more easily to behave. Now, I think in the finance industry specifically, I think the challenges are actually pretty common across most industries, certainly in terms of office work. So I wouldn't pull anything specifically out of the finance industry in particular. However, I've worked for 30 years in the finance industry, so that's where my knowledge is, and I can definitely say that those kind of symptoms and those kind of challenges do really pose quite significant challenges. Now, and often what happens is people work longer hours, work harder, and their personal lives suffer. to do the things that we are expected and required to do in the workplace. So on the flip side of that, as with all types of people, there's different roles in different positions in different organizations that fit certain types of brains. With some ADHD people, hyperfocus is a thing. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you can choose when or what to hyperfocus on. But if your interests are aligned with the role that you have in the firm, as mine are, like a hyperfocus session where you can do one specific thing to the exclusion of all others for a long period of time can be a benefit. And if you look at some of the autistic traits, they can be benefits in certain circumstances, but not all circumstances, not all people. And so it's really kind of imperative to align people's skills and the ways their brains work with the types of roles and types of jobs that we're expecting them to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what we're all about, and the message that we're trying to kind of advocate across the entire financial services industry here at Gain. I'm just conscious. I mean, there's a big development taking place within BlackRock with Edinburgh becoming your European hub, and I know that's a project that you and colleagues are working on now, Graham. But what do you think of the elements of a truly neuro-inclusive workplace, and what's worked well at BlackRock, globally, and kind of what things have you still got in progress?
So I think the biggest first step we made was to create an employee-led neurodiversity community, to create that sense of belonging, and actually have a group that can advocate for themselves. I think with all of the things that I mentioned about ADHD, filling in forms and tasks and repetitive and planning and things can be a problem. So it's important to create a group that can advocate for itself. So I created BlackRock's neurodiversity network about 18 months ago. We have currently about 1% of the firm in this community already. If you look at the global stats for neurodivergence, it's up to 20% of the population. So I think we've got a long way to go. But this was really that key in terms of creating a safe space for individuals to find like-minded people and really create that sense of belonging. From that point onwards, like things have started growing and becoming possible. So like that community and giving a voice to a group rather than into an individual has been very, very powerful. And it's allowed that group to advocate for the things that do work and the things that don't work, and really given us, a voice in terms of making meaningful change. One of the things that I did once we started that group and we were of a certain size was I created a neurodiversity task force, and I gathered leaders from various functions across the firm, from our desktop, engineers and the people who provide the software and the hardware that we use every day, to talent acquisition, to our abilities network and our health and safety team that provide adjustments, and from our building services teams, all of these functions that are necessary. Again, and it's not just neurodiversity, but with any disability, whether it's a physical impairment or sight impairment or hearing impairment, there's a big overlap between the adjustments that some neurodivergent people need and many of the other disabilities. But also there's a big overlap between people without disabilities. If you find working in an open plan office, really overwhelming, as a lot of autistic people and many ADHD people, hypersensitivity is a thing. You want to be able to support people in working in a work environment so that they're not distracted and they can do the best work they can. So we've added a lot of support, not just for neurodivergence, but we've been driving some of these changes through that neurodivergence lens. Things like we've created an adjustments portal to make it very clear to find adjustments, accommodations, and BlackRock portal, so that anybody in the firm can actually find what's available. And we put a kind of case officer style approach behind that. So there is somebody on the back end of that helps any individual get the tools, the support, the training, the coaching that they need to be their best selves in work. So that's been really helpful and given us an anchor to start building out some of this support, not specifically for neurodiversity, but across all abilities.
Yeah, that's something that resonates with me as well. I mean, I often describe when you're making adjustments or accommodations, if we're talking to our friends in the US, that if you get it right for neurodivergent people, I mean, it's like a drop curve, isn't it? You get it right for everybody.
Yeah, somebody said when we started this, actually found that some of the other streams in our disability network, and I'm on the steering committee for our ability network globally. We're looking at what we were doing in the neurodivergence space and kind of asking questions. Why is neurodivergence getting all of the airtime at the moment? And it was a valid question. And maybe we come back to that a little bit later today. But the quote that somebody said was, "A rising tide lifts all boats," which I really liked. And I think it's very important as we're thinking about neurodivergence in industry to not just focus in on neurodivergent employees, but many of the things that we're doing in this area and that we need to do in this area applicable to everybody and applicable to other disabilities too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm conscious that BlackRock's is global investment house, Graham, and here you're based in Edinburgh. But how difficult did you find it to enroll executive leadership um, support and advocacy, globally?
So I, maybe because of my ADHD, have no fear. And I was, looking back on it, maybe too open about my new diagnosis. But my first thought was, when I was diagnosed, or even before I was diagnosed, I actually started having conversations with employees around the firm and being very open about what I was going through, and rapidly gained other people coming up and saying, "Hey, I'd like to be part of this." There was obviously a reticence in terms of fear of coming out, as it were, in terms of potential impacts on what people think of people. But the more I talked about it, and I kind of barged my way into many town halls and spoke about my own story, it became very easy. I was very pleasantly surprised by, when I approached people, like everybody that I've approached around the organization in senior parts of the organization that look after all the things that I talked about earlier. Everybody's been super supportive, and I feel like what was missing was that voice and that community to help spread the word of things that were already going on but maybe weren't known about in the firm, but also to help feedback from employees on the ground into these processes, and help shape these things. And I've just been astounded by the response I've had from people around the firm, from our DEI team, from building services across the board.
Yeah, I take my hat off to you, Graham. I mean, when I worked for a large bank with an insurance division, I mean, I was quite open about talking about my physical disability, but I didn't feel comfortable at all taking the mask off and talking about my neurodivergence. I mean, that's because I just didn't think the culture was there to make it, it's safe really to do that. So, I kind of appreciate what that your environment would not be dissimilar to mine. I mean, so I really appreciate the how brave you've been in progressing this agenda and just being yourself really and opening up for the benefit of others. Um, I mean, what do you think the kind of common the barriers would be to people just starting to discuss neuroinclusion within their own workplace?
So I think I've covered a few of them already, but like fundamentally, I think it's really around a lack of awareness. And I say that from coming from a place of a lack of awareness for most of my life, and understanding about what neurodivergence is and what it isn't. And I think the more that we can, raise awareness on what is all this stuff we're talking about, what does it actually mean for people? How does it impact people's daily lives? You mentioned masking a minute ago. This is a big part of most neurodivergent divergence. You live your whole life feeling different and feeling like you're not quite as good as everybody else, and you build these layers and layers of barriers up and learn how people interact with each other rather than it coming naturally. So I think, those 20% of neurodivergent people, like that's a lot of people. So you will know many, many people that are neurodivergent, but you will never tell, right? Because they have figured out how to portray themselves in the world to not come across as neurodivergent. And somebody said something that I liked a couple of weeks ago, which was fitting in is the opposite of belonging, which struck a chord with me. So I think awareness that like the people all around you in the workplace or at home, 1 in 5 of them is likely neurodivergent, whether it's dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, ADHD, or any of the others. And we've, as a culture, we've built up this mask to try and fit in. So I think that mask in itself is, one of the biggest barriers to actually being open and learning about this thing and being actually able to be yourself in work. So I think with that, it's about training, it's about awareness. They're really the first things, and once we tackle that across the whole career journey, that's when it becomes like truly inclusive, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I saw an interesting tweet from Stuart McDonald, is actuary by day, his Twitter handle. He's quite prominent within the actuarial community, and he was responding to a question about neurodiversity in the actuarial profession, and he basically said, yeah, the actuarial profession is very neuro inclusive. We look forward to neurotypicals joining us. So I thought that was I don't think someone would have tweeted that a couple of years ago. It was kind of great to see that. But we've just got to keep pushing, I think. Do you agree?
I 100% do. And again, it's like this isn't about, singling out a particular. I don't like the narrative of superpowers and autistic people are good at this or ADHD people are good at that. Like with any other condition in humans, like there's a spectrum and a continuum, and some things you might be good at. Any one individual might be really bad at things. Like autistic people, might have a really good memory or really good ability with numbers, but they also might not. So I think, that's really why like this inclusivity comes in. It's not about a special protected, group and having, a specific target to get a certain type of neurodiverse individuals in certain types of roles. So it really does come with that, holistic approach to really finding out how people work the best. And certain people might be good at certain things and they might be good in a certain role, but might not be so good in another role, just like everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, you've been kind enough to share, the strategies that have worked at BlackRock. But, again, looking at your journey, I mean, what do you think what approaches do you think have not been as successful as you might have hoped, and what lessons have you learned from that?
So I think I've been very pleasantly surprised with, the response from around my firm, and it seems like around the industry as well. And we've had, really good meetups and overlaps with some of the other finance organizations around there. I just go back to that, that awareness is really the key. Like, myself, I was thinking, ADHD folks were young boys mainly, that were just hyperactive and they grew out of it. And I think that's, proven not to be true. Girls are much less likely to be diagnosed with ADHD than boys, so these things all kind of come into each other, by looking at neurodiversity and looking at neurodivergence and hiring, for example, like, we're helping to address some of the other inclusion and diversity, goals of our industry and most industries. So, from my perspective, I haven't seen anything that we've wanted to push on that has been pushed back on. Not everything's possible. We're, as a global firm, highlight one specific region or one specific country. We want to again, that rise the tide for all boats. And so that's not quick. It doesn't happen overnight. There's different solutions in different regions and different for different things. But on a whole, I'd say that, that willingness to be, involved and engaged and be inclusive has been very good so far.
Yeah, I agree completely in terms of what you said about women. And I mean, the psychiatrists I've been talking to were basically saying that, the women are just, and well, young girls and women are just far better at masking. But they have the same issues with coping strategies as boys and men do. Um, and I think equally, the fact that here we both are having this conversation today, and we were both diagnosed late in life. I think that also kind of proves the point that you don't grow out of being, autistic or having ADHD or being neurodivergent. You just grow older, don't you?
Mm.
And I think a lot of a lot of the communication issues that organizations have with maybe older staff of whatever the gender is, and older customers. I think this is something that needs to really be factored into their thinking. Um, Again, looking ahead, and in terms of your role within BlackRock, it'd be equally your role as an ambassador for gain and advocacy within Scotland. Um, you know, uh, what kind of changes, what ambition and do you have? What changes would you like to see?
So just before that, I think I wanted just to touch on that last point. Like we see the like younger people these days coming in through graduate and apprenticeship schemes that are much more aware of of neurodivergence. I think universities have been doing a very good job in terms
Oh,
of being neuro-inclusive, and so we actually are seeing a very big gap between the more junior talent coming into the industry right now who are more aware of their own neurodivergence, but they're also aware of what adjustments they might need because they're used to having this through the educational system now than they were before. And I
yeah,
do think that there's a large gap of people from 30 plus years old that these diagnoses didn't exist when we were growing up. You were just hyperactive and just told to get on with it. So I do really think that you know there is a specific area of focus for the uh, those of us that have been in work longer that may not even realize and still struggle. So I think it's definitely something that we're aware of. Um, and again, I think that rising tide, going back to that rising tide, like the influx of junior talent that are actually aware of what they should be entitled to or they need to be their best selves is actually helping everybody that's already in industry.
yeah.
So looking ahead, I'm very I'm very positive about the progress being made, albeit I think as a country and as the world, we're still fairly early on in this journey. Um, that coming back to raising awareness, is key to reducing stigma for people advocating for themselves in work. With ADHD, people do tend to leave jobs. That sense of rejection, maybe not getting the support that they need to be able to do the job, can lead to many jobs and moving jobs. Creating an industry where people can find the right roles that suit the way that their brains work is a huge thing to do. I hope, as being part of Gain, I personally and BlackRock gets access to all the great work and research that Gain are producing at the moment, but equally and probably more so, creating this community across firms in our industry to share best practice, to learn from each other, to learn what works and what doesn't. I think that is probably the most important thing. Like we're going to move, not just as an industry forward, but we need to take the country forward. I think it was, there's a real need from the government also, and from industry to find talent. And there's talent being left out there that, given the right support and given the right roles, can thrive in our industry. And I'm just very keen to work with Gain and create a community up here in Scotland where we have a lot of asset managers and insurance companies and banks to really start taking this debate forwards and to learn from each other. And so I'm very excited to be Gain's ambassador for Scotland. I won't claim to know what I'm doing yet, but I've got the passion and I'm open-minded and I'm very much looking forward to working with you.
Well, we're very excited to have you on board, Graham, and we look forward to working with you and BlackRock as well. What's the best way of contacting you, Graham, if colleagues want to reach out to you?
Yeah, no, feel free. Anybody in Scotland, anybody in investment management, asset management, insurance, please feel free to reach out. My email address is graham@gaintogether.org, or you can get me on LinkedIn.
Splendid. On that, Graham, I think that's a wrap. That's brilliant. Thank you.